Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today I'm going to be discussing a book review on Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. So I just finished this about 45 minutes ago, and so this is sort of my initial thoughts, and I've skimmed just a couple reviews on Goodreads. So yeah, let's just dive in. So I actually feel like the blurb on the back of this book does a good job of setting up the premise of the book. We have Marcus. He's a, famous, hot TV star. He's also a secret fan. I mean, he's a fanboy of the original source material for the TV show that he's on, and he writes fan fiction to sort of vent his own frustrations and correct the things that the show is doing wrong, but it's obviously all secret because he could get in trouble if it's ever found out that he's like criticizing the show online in this online persona. Our main female character is April. She is a geologist. She's also a fangirl of this show, which is very like Game of Thrones like. And she has an online friendship with Marcus's like online persona. And April kind of goes viral when she posts a picture of her doing a cosplay of one of the characters from the show. And April is a plus size person. And so she's getting a lot of like hate and fat shaming on the internet. And so Marcus does think that April, this woman who posted this cosplay picture is gorgeous. He asks her out on a date. It's like a little bit of a PR stunt, but also like he just kind of wants to shut up the haters. And then they go on their first date and he realizes that this woman is this online friend that he's been talking to, and it's sort of like his closest friend in the fandom for the last couple of years. So he knows who she is, but like he keeps his online persona a secret. So to speak to the writing of this book, I actually really enjoyed it. There are a lot of laugh out loud moments. There were puns, there was sarcasm. I felt like our main couple characters were very like witty, and there was a lot of humor that was brought in by the side characters, and so I enjoyed that element of her writing. There are also a lot of like layers to this writing because we have Marcus and April as like the characters, and then they also have their online personas and there's online screen names, and then there's also the like characters of the TV show that they're and books that they're big fans of. And I think the writing was done really well to craft this story where there are parallels in each of those three like storylines. Like we have the like book, fake characters, Lavinia and Aeneas, and then we have their like online personas, and those are like sort of parallel stories, and then they also parallel like real Marcus and April. And so like once I saw these layers of like how they have these, I mean, they're it's very like well done. I appreciated how it was done, and I felt like that was masterful writing. I also feel like the tone of the word choice that was used really helped set the tone. And I mean, I know that's like the job of the author, but there was multiple times where I was like, I don't know, I just kind of recognized it in a way that I don't normally recognize it, and then I was like, oh, she's choosing a word here that really is setting the meaning, and I just really was appreciative of that. And I also felt like the sexy times that were written in this book were appropriately steamy and still realistic and were enjoyable for me. So getting into some of the tropes, themes, elements, this book has celebrity romance because he is a, TV movie star, famous guy, and she is just sort of like a fan. So there's like that fan versus star element. And then there's also this sort of like mild catfish element because Marcus knows who she is online and is like pretending that he is not his online persona. So I never felt like that was really skeevy particularly. I felt like he should have been more clear about that, but also like the revelation that he writes this material online could have been really career damaging. So like I understood why he withheld that information. I disagree that he should have withheld it for so long, and also, it was an indication of his trusting her, but that kind of leads into some of the major themes and elements of this book. Is I felt like there was a lot of being true to oneself. There was a lot of like vulnerability and truth and trust kind of elements, especially regarding fan fiction. There was a lot of discussion about how the writing of the fan fiction led to these development of communities online and getting support from those communities. And April has had to deal with content that is sort of fat shaming or fat phobic or issues along those lines in the communities. And she kind of reaches out to her friends and says, look guys, like, you guys are my friends, but you have inadvertently hurt my feelings, and I'm trying to just bring awareness to this topic, which I thought was really like interesting, because there's this idea about getting support from this community. And I personally have read fan fiction in the past, but I've been part of fandoms, but it's always been like an inactive member of fandoms. Like I like something and I enjoy it, and I sometimes enjoy like reading fan fiction or like watching things, but like it's always the things that other people are doing. And so, but I do know that so many people say that like being a part of a community who writes fan fiction, who betas each other's works, who like participates on like, forums and that kind of thing, like that is an amazing community. And I really felt like that was a strong element in this book. And to some extent, a major critique, which I will get to kind of later. But I did enjoy the themes and elements about being true to oneself and kind of having bravery to do that. And I think another major theme of this book was your family and the expectations that are placed on you by your family and throughout your upbringing. To some extent, both April and Marcus have like emotionally manipulative and abusive families that they've had to struggle with because of the expectations that their families had for each of them respectively. And it sort of has affected how they both each individually see their own self-worth. And I really felt like both April and Marcus were carrying that like trauma and those issues in their current selves, and they were allowing those problems to affect themselves and how they view themselves and how they carry themselves throughout throughout their current day-to-day lives. And they were also bringing that baggage to this romantic relationship. So I really felt like those elements brought some more emotional range to this book. It wasn't 100% focused on the romantic issues between the two main characters. And those family conflicts and drama brought more like conflict to the story, because there was the tension between our two main characters in the romantic sense and in the like secret keeping sense and the trusting each other sense. But there was also this like junk that each of them brought, that was sort of part of who they were and what they were bringing to this relationship as well. So I kind of really liked some of those themes, but it was also hard to read. And it definitely brought a lot more conflict. I don't want to get too much more into that, but so yeah, overall, there were certain things that I really liked. There were these media portions or fanfic excerpts or script excerpts sort of between every chapter, and I felt like those functioned to usually be funny, but sometimes they strongly paralleled the action that you just finished reading. Did it really contribute that much to the book? No, but also a lot of times it brought some levity and change of pace. I will say that for me, I'm not very like type sensitive, but I felt like there was a lot of formatting choices in this book that usually had to do with like texting or emailing. And sometimes it would be offset and in its own like little chunk, but then the response would be in the middle of a paragraph and it would just be like a font change. So I did feel where those sections were heavy, where they were more texting or emailing a lot, like that different formatting choices could have been done. So I don't know. I said that comment to someone yesterday, and they said, so maybe this might be a good audiobook option. And I don't know about that either, because I feel like sometimes it's hard in an audiobook for the narration to be clear what is being thought versus narrated versus like texted. So if that's something you're sensitive to, I would kind of maybe just take a quick look at a physical copy and see if that is something that might bother you. Other bits that I really liked was I really enjoyed the side characters. I felt like they functioned to bring a lot of levity and not bring too much drama to the overall story, there was enough going on between Marcus and April and their individual families that the side characters really functioned to uplift the story. And I especially really enjoyed Alex. I felt like he was hilarious. I'm really happy he's getting his own book coming soon. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Alex's book. And I did enjoy the sexy times, and I thought that part was good. So overall, I feel like the rating that I'm settling on for this exact moment, like 1 hour after reading the book, is sort of a 3.75 or a 4-star. I feel like there were some decent messages about kind of standing up for yourself and being true to oneself, and discussing what relationship you're willing to have with your family for your own mental health. And I felt like there was good representation both from April in her, curvy / fat rep. And I also feel like Marcus was dyslexic, which was something that he kind of acknowledges and is sort of dealt with relatively easily and is not an issue. But overall, I felt like the bleak moment, that source of conflict as being the bleak moment, and that resolution was like okay, but like not amazing. And there was also a chunk where there was some skipped time, like after they had been together for a couple of dates, then suddenly it was like a month later. And I don't mind time jumps, but I don't like time jumps that early in the relationship where we don't get to see that emotional development. They were very clearly both much more enamored with each other after this 1 month time jump than they had been in the previous chapter. And I was like, that's what I want to see. Like, I want to see more of them getting to know each other and finding out the things that they like about each other. And also, it's very clear that the author was not going to skip the part where Marcus tells April that, who he is and his online persona. So I was like, okay, so now we just feel guilty that he hasn't said anything. So I didn't super love that part, and it felt like they kind of, that time jump and skipping over some of that laying out of dates in that part kind of just made their depth of feelings feel a little bit rushed. So yeah, so overall, I did enjoy this. I felt like I read a couple of the reviews online right before I got on here. I was kind of looked to see people who had very differing views from me, why they said that. And so I felt like some of the top complaints that I was seeing in just the couple reviews that I skimmed were that that sort of an agreement that the bleak moment and that source of conflict that was causing the drama of the book was kind of like or like maybe not quite resolved to their satisfaction. It felt very like romance book to me. So, whatever. That's, some people will like it and some people won't. And then there was also some complaints that the two main characters basically seemed less mature than their ages should be. They were like 36 and 39. And so there's a lot of people who were like, how can 40-year-olds be having this much problems? And on the one hand, I slightly agree with that, not because, people who are almost 40 should not have room for emotional development in their own lives and growth and character, development of selves, because I think that is a lifelong thing, and not having anything to do with fan fiction either, because that doesn't have anything to do with age. But there was, I guess, maybe a tiny hope for myself that like by the time I'm 36 or 38 or 40 or 42, that I'll have my life a little bit more figured out. But I don't know. I didn't super hate that. I feel like that's sort of a subjective thing. It's like, how old do you feel like the person is? I'd say one of the main complaints that I kept seeing in those couple reviews that I skimmed was regarding the fan fiction element and the fact that we have it's sort of twofold. One is that there was complaints by people who said, gross, an actor who is then inserting himself into like the fan fiction community, like that's like an invasion of privacy not an invasion of privacy, but an invasiveness, and also a, sort of parallel to an author who's sticking themselves into like the review sphere. And I'm not totally sure how I feel about that. I feel that there's I didn't feel like that was the case with Marcus in this book. Like, yes, he was an actor, but it sort of seemed clear to me that he was a fan of the source material inherently. And so he was frustrated that the show writers and showrunners were kind of like ruining this storyline and the characters and their character arcs and the development. And so he was just kind of writing fan fiction for himself. And I did not ever get the impression that Marcus's online persona was trying to like influence the online community. I don't know exactly how I feel. I don't feel like it quite parallels an author getting involved in reviewers, especially since I feel like authors who get involved with their own books reviews are frequently kind of being like, well, actually, and I did not feel that Marcus was doing that at all. So I feel like that's sort of its own kind of complicated. It kind of depends maybe to some extent how active you are in fandom, maybe. Because like I said, I was on the fringes of any sort of fandom or participation. And so I sort of feel like maybe if you were more involved in the community, you might have a stronger response to that element. But the other major factor that I was reading that had to do sort of with the critique of the fandom and fan fiction elements was that basically Olivia Dade makes no secret at all that this is paralleling Game of Thrones, and basically paralleling the Marcus is modeled after one of the actors from Game of Thrones. And like in her acknowledgement, in Dade's acknowledgements, she says, thank you to the fandom community of the people who shipped like Brienne and Jaime from Game of Thrones. And so there was some people who were commenting that like this was a self-insert, and it was kind of creepy that she was essentially writing this whole book modeling after like a real life actor. And the the blatant references to the fact that this is Game of Thrones and the references to that specific real life fandom for real life things was gross. I don't know exactly how I feel about that either, just because I feel like this book was I mean I understood that it was supposed to parallel Game of Thrones in a lot of ways, but I saw someone who said, well, this was very cathartic, as someone who had watched like a real life person on Goodreads said, I watched Game of Thrones and was also super disappointed, and so reading this book was sort of cathartic because it was somebody like acknowledging that Game of Thrones parallels were crummy. But I don't know. I wasn't really I watched Game of Thrones and I've read the books that are published at this point, but like it was never really my fandom, and I don't feel like I know enough about that actor from Game of Thrones, and I didn't feel like that. I saw the Game of Thrones parallels, but I did not see the like idea that Marcus was modeled off of one of his actors and therefore it was like gross. But I also feel like there's a lot of other fan fiction and real fiction that are modeled off of real people. So I was kind of like, I feel like that's something that also can be really subjective. So those are my long and rambling thoughts on Spoiler Alert. Overall, I'm going to give it like a 3.75. I don't think I was particularly spoilery in this review. So yeah, overall, there were some good bits and there were some less good bits. I generally enjoyed this book and the reading experience. I thought the writing was great. I'm really excited to dive into more of Olivia Dade's books. I am interested in reading the sequel, or not sequel, but like the next book in this universe with Alex as the main character. And I enjoyed the other themes of this book about family and like being true to oneself and being vulnerable and sort of searching for truth and opening up and trusting other people. So I am ultimately going to rate Spoiler Alert 3.75 or 4 stars. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have read this book or other books by this author, or if you have other thoughts about fan fiction or the fandom communities, I would love to hear those down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching and talk to you next time. Bye.